It's something to talk about. I know, a little different. Filian Guerrero in for Patty Arroyo all month long. She deserves a vacation. So since they gave me the reins, I said, July, let's focus on political status. And we're gonna start with our first part in a very special limited series here on Something to Talk About with Independence. Since we just wrapped up Independence Day for America, why not weigh independence for Guam? If you want to know why and this is the best status and maybe some of the misconceptions about it, you're going to have to tune in. It's Something to Talk About right after this. Welcome back to Something to Talk About. Filian Guerrero in for the much-deserved vacationing Patty Arroyo. And like I said, when I think of July, the celebration of American Independence Day, wrapping up Philippine Independence Month and going into Liberation, I just think of political status. So I'm joined by our very first of the three task forces that are represented on the Commission on Decolonization. And so we have the Independence Task Force represented by Dr. Mike Bavacqua and Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero. Half a day again.
Half a day.
And so this is being taped after your Nalatla Songs of Freedom. How'd the event go?
It was awesome. Yeah, we had Magat and his daughter Sumahi were actually doing a head count, and so we had about 400 people present, and there were amazing performers. We had a multi-generational cast from 11-year-old Sanahi Sanchez, who's Difuntu Eddie Leon Guerrero Benavente's granddaughter, and we had honored him at the concert. We dedicated the concert to both him and Angel Leon Guerrero Santos, whose death anniversary is on July 6th. They share the same anniversary, and so we wanted to pay tribute to their life through music, because Uncle Ed actually is a wonderful musician, and he was part of a band called Chamorro.
Yeah.
And they made an album that, if you really listen to a lot of the songs, they're very motivated by the quest for decolonization. They really call on a change in times. They really advocate for independence. And so Sanahi and some of our really talented local musicians, Shannon McManus, her husband John, Pat Palomo on keys, Andrew Gamitautel, and then Shannon's dad played drums and her sister sang as well. But they created kind of a tribute band, and they played two songs from the Chamorro album. And then Sanahi sang with Stacia Guzman another song from the album at the end. But then, most of the day were different artists who took the theme, Songs of Freedom, and most of them performed original music that they had written. So we had songs about obviously like the need for us to be free, but also JD in a Wave and his band Trespass, they did a song about the war survivors and what it means to be a survivor. And then Stacia Guzman performed some of her Chamorro music. There was actually a lot of Chamorro music, which was what was really beautiful too.
That's great. Mike, I think that there's this innate connection. It's not just Guam, but if you look in other places, sort of activism and performing arts really go hand in hand. I obviously see, like with a lot of our younger, sort of self-determined minded residents, that there would be some sort of resonation. But why does your group sort of embrace that connectivity between higher thought and fine art?
Oh, I mean, it's, if you have a group of people in a room and you're talking to them about stuff, you'll only reach a certain amount of people who want to kind of engage in that way. If you're singing, if you're performing, you can reach a lot of people where the talking points wouldn't connect with them. if it's an art show, or if it's something which can kind of, because that's a lot of people will resist something about change or about sort of because the sort of the front of their mind says, oh no, we can't do that, or they have a lot of insecurities or fears. But if you can bring it in a more sort of poetic, inspiring way, it'll get past a lot of their defenses and it'll latch onto something which is meaningful or special or important to them. And that's really what we saw yesterday, is that a lot of people, and we did a survey, and basically 70% of the people who were there had never been to any of our events before.
Oh, okay.
And have never had any real contact with these discussions before, but they were drawn to this idea about songs of freedom, and then just like questioning like why do we celebrate Independence Day in this way? And we could do like a lecture series where me or Victoria talked to you about it, but wouldn't it be much nicer if you created a space where a bunch of artists could put their particular take on that question about why we celebrate it this way, and what if we were to use this space to think about what would be best for the island in the future?
Well, certainly, you do have a horse in the race of self-determination, advocating for independence. I brought this discussion point up with Amber Benavente Sanchez and Melvin Wampat Borja when discussing the event that just wrapped up. And that was that I find it really interesting, maybe even a sense of irony, that when we observe Philippine independence, it's this ubiquitous celebration of the movement, that there wasn't a lot of, oh, well, they didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. And wow, they really did have a tough time getting their sea legs as a young democracy. It was just ubiquitous celebration. When we talk about American independence, again, sort of universally, it's a good idea. It didn't matter that, they really didn't have their act together before they were figuring out how to secede from Great Britain. Also, again, sort of wow, well, they really didn't know what they were gonna do when they embarked on this journey of independence. And to me, it sort of is a little, I don't know, interesting that the same amount of, I guess, benefit of the doubt isn't extended to an idea like an independent Guam. And I don't know, I mean, you guys are both academics. I don't know if you sort of try to think about why that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is the length of time we have been colonized, and really the degree to which our people have accepted that this is sort of our fate in a way, right? So when you look at what we learn always that sort of the American government and America as a nation is sort of supreme, the greatest country in the world. And for a lot of people, it's like, why would we give that up, right? The greatest country in the world being part of that, without the critical lens of, well, we belong to America, but we're not part of America. And America makes that very clear. But also, again, in terms of the colonization of the mind and the imagination, it's very real for us. And I think that for people, we've been told all the time that we can't do it on our own, that if America leaves, another country will just come in and take over. And that's because, for the last 400 to 500 years, depending on when you mark, whether you're marking Magellan or you're marking the beginning of the mission. But, really for this length of time, that's what's been told to us in every possible way, that you cannot do this on your own. You have nothing to offer the world. What are your resources? Look at how corrupt your local government is. And so it's very easy for people to say why we can't do it. And so we've really focused on, actually, these are the reasons why we can do it. We've looked at other model nations of similar size, other places that have decolonized and achieved independence with far worse situations than we are in terms of their ability to transition into self-governance. And we've also taken a look at, the things we can do right, and the talent that we have and the intellect that we have in our own community. And it's just a matter of working with our community so that we can all believe in ourselves enough to know that this is something that, yes, the Americans and the Filipinos fought hard for and achieved, and that we too can achieve. Most of the world is independent. Why can't we be?
Well, and we'll get into the reasons for maybe why independence is the model that you guys want to pursue. But I do want to ask you, Miguel, if if we are battling against centuries of indoctrination, of oppression, of colonizing of mind, body, and spirit, if we are up against resistance unless what you present is a perfect model that can, guarantee no hard times in the future, that must be a really tough mandate for you guys to meet.
It is. You brought up a good point when you talked about how the United States, when it first started, it was struggling as well. Like, we always forget that the U.S. Constitution wasn't the first document that started the United States. They created something else. It was a big failure, and so then they had to start again. And actually, even the Declaration of Independence, there was 100 different drafts of it. And so it's not something where any country has had the ability to make it perfect ahead of time. Part of it relies on sort of just understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, strategizing. And so, we've taken the approach of really just talking about like the possibilities that are out there, and also empowering ourselves to remember, because your relationship with your colonizer a lot of times is filled with weakness and dependency, right? Especially in July. July is a time when we oftentimes celebrate the United States Liberation Day, and we kind of bring out this narrative of our victimization in World War II, and we need Uncle Sam to survive. And so we have to kind of push back against that and remind ourselves that we've done things in the past. I mean, that's why every month we honor a different community member, a Magatauta, somebody who, whether in their village, in the government, or in history, they sort of achieved sort of important things for our community, whether they were a Tetsa, whether they were a Chamorro fighter during World War II against the Japanese, whether they were a politician. And so it's important that as we go about this, we look in those two ways. What can we look to other countries and what the possibilities are? And also, can we believe in ourselves? Because that's one of the main things we need to think about now is believing in ourselves.
Well, we'll get into some concrete examples of why independence is good, and maybe dispel some myths that perpetuate about why independence is bad when we come back from this short break. Welcome back to Something to Talk About. Phil Leon Guerrero in for Patty Arroyo, and I have my friends Victoria Leon Guerrero and Dr. Mike Vivacqua from the Independence Task Force, part of the Commission on Decolonization. So let's get into the nitty-gritty about your chosen political status. What makes independence, let's start with economically, the best for Guam in the future?
Well, I mean, the first thing, and I think the biggest thing that in all of the issues affecting us that independence brings us is a voice and the ability to negotiate, right? So Dr. Underwood says, in business, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, right? So if we apply that to Guam's economy, in an interview we did with economist Joe Bradley, he said, Guam's economy is such that as an unincorporated territory, we will never be allowed to sink so deep into economic depression, but we will never be allowed to soar to the economic heights that we could actually reach, right? Guam has the potential because we are in the middle of sort of the world's economic hub. There's so much going on around us that we can't partake in simply because of our relationship to the United States. And because most of Asia Pacific that's economically powerful is at odds with America in terms of defense-wise. So Guam is not really able to maximize the relationships that we would be able to if we were in charge, if we were sovereign and we were making decisions for ourselves, even in our relationship with the United States. So economically, we could benefit more from hosting military bases if we actually negotiated what that looked like, what the compensation for that would be, for example. And then in terms, of course, of trade, in terms of exploring new industries, right? So for Guam, we've really been sort of limited to tourism and the military as our main economic sources, but There are many different industries that have been thrown out there that I've heard, like we could go into telecommunications, especially because of our location, right? We could explore even ways to provide energy in more efficient ways, but also create models for the rest of the region that could economically benefit us. Those are things that have been proposed to me. We could expand the way that we treat tourism as a major industry for Guam by expanding who comes to the island and what kind of tourism we are attracting, right? So we could attract ecotourism or cultural tourism where we do celebrate and share our uniqueness with the rest of the world. Not solely come to Guam where America's Day begins, but come to Guam, this newly formed independent nation with this rich culture and this incredibly beautiful island. So, and also we would control our port, both our airport and our shipping. So we would be able to collect fees on ships that come and refuel or on Guam, right? Or we would be able to control and collect taxes and fees from the airplanes that come in and out. And we could welcome new airlines in and out and not make it so expensive to leave or come into Guam. We could do, actually this came up in our last independence meeting.
Okay.
Someone was saying we could do a green fee where every visitor that comes to Guam is charged $15 in a green fee to keep the land clean and sustainable, to fund projects that will clean up Guam, so that, because that's another thing, is that we've seen so much illegal dumping, for example. She was saying, why not collect a green fee? I mean, that's $15 on a travel visa, but it adds up when you welcome as many tourists as we do. So I think the greatest possibility that independence presents to Guam is the ability to negotiate these types of possibilities.
So, Maguette, that's not to say that when we're choosing a political status, we should only consider economic factors, because independence can benefit us so much more than just economically.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because if we really think about the way our lives are structured on Guam, whether you're looking at like the educational system, the legal system, the government, the healthcare system, these are not sort of, it's not like sort of Chief Kipua and Magalai Harao, they got together and they said, what is best for our people? Let's form a healthcare system. These things were kind of introduced to us, and we've tried to do our best in some ways to fix them here or there, but they weren't meant for us. It's kind of like if you imagine what it would be like. So when people complain about sort of our students and how well our students, how poor are doing, how poor the educational system is, like really just think about what it would be like if you had like a school system in Texas which decided to suddenly do everything the Chinese way. And so you had Latino kids, white kids, black kids in Houston, Texas, who are looking at each other and wondering, why the hell did we just learn a week about Chairman Mao Zedong? What does that have to do with my life? What does that have to do with Texas? I mean, that's the lives of our students in the school system, is that they see the lives around, which is a very Pacific life, which has a lot of Asian influence, a lot of Chamorro influence, but it's not connecting them to that, their educational system. And so we've kind of taken the system, made small changes here and there, but the conversation about independence would basically create the potential to really come together and think, well, given our history, given our culture, what is a school system that would reflect our values and what we would want our students to be like in the future? Would we want to prepare them to be able to sustain themselves in our natural resources here? We could do that. Do we want to prepare them to get jobs in high-tech industries? You can do that. But you always got to do it from your place. And so the conversation on independence is so important in getting all of these things which we need for our lives, but focusing them so they serve our values and our interests.
It sounds like, again, that there's been this complaint throughout our history that why does it seem like there's a ceiling that we reach and we just can't seem to get past it? And I guess there's some systemic suppression that's going on, and independence gives us the ability to say, yeah, let's take that lid off because we really have no use for it.
And even attract, like, so Guam really does suffer from a brain drain where a lot of people who leave for education often don't come back thinking there aren't possibilities for them to use that education here. But imagine if we were shaping an independent Guahan and we did a call out to all the people from Guam who have left and become engineers, world-class engineers, doctors, diplomats and, attorneys and everything that we would need to really build this nation, and said, come home and be part of making a nation. And we would have a space for them. They could use their skill set and contribute to our island. We'd have this surge. I think in context too, we often, with the education conversation, think that, this is all we can do, is sort of this system that's been put on us, right? To get federal funds to run our schools, we have to take their standardized tests and pass them. But the United States ranks relatively low in terms of what they offer and in terms of educational success. And there are so many other nations that have done it so differently. And largely it's because they do put at the center of learning your experience, your history. And if our students are not having their own unique history, their own unique role in the world at the center of their learning, then what does that then do for them for the rest of their lives? Does their experience matter? Does where they're from matter if they're not learning about it most of their, formative years? So.
Can we very quickly address some of the misconceptions about independence that are sort of ubiquitous here? One, if we become independent, we're going to go back to the Stone Age, grass huts, thatch roofs, and all of that. That's what independence is.
Well, no, a lot of what we have that's modern doesn't necessarily come from the United States or our relationship with the United States. It's largely because of the global market and globalization. So we would still be able to, maintain the same businesses that are here. We would be able to still bring in things. We may even be able to explore new trade relationships that will make the goods that we have become accustomed to more affordable. And really, the idea is we can learn from the ideas of the past and the things that worked for our ancestors, but we don't have to emulate their lives entirely, right? We would choose what works for us now, and keep in mind that this is who we are today. Independence is not saying that everything that we have become as a result of colonization is bad. Not at all. It's saying that we are from a place that has not been able to exercise this human right to sovereignty, and that for most of our history we were sovereign, and that we can be again. But you don't see sovereign nations that achieve sovereignty after colonization and say that this looks like our ancient society. No, they still thrive as successful. Look at the rest of the Pacific, right? There are our neighboring island nations are still successful in a modern context. And in fact, they have political power, global power, that allows them to reap the benefits of modern society in every possible way. So we've never said, okay, let's just go back in time. We have said that we could learn from the leadership models of the past that were successful. We could learn from the ways in which our ancestors took better care of the land and were able to know what needed to be done to pass this land on to us, right? These are things that we would want to emulate, but we, for our aircon babies, wouldn't necessarily say we're no longer going to live in concrete homes with air conditioning if that's how our people have evolved, if that's who we are today.
Well, and I guess the bottom line is none of the status options, if they're implemented, would raise everything we have on the island and start from scratch, right? We're all building on top of what we have. Okay, well, it's time to say goodbye already. I know these conversations always go so quickly. So let's talk about if people want to learn more about your movement, where they can reach out to you.
And so you can, the easiest way is to follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter account, and there is a temporary website at independentguahan.com, and we will have our full website up at some point in the future.
And in all those social media sites, you would just search Independent Guahan. We also have an email, independentguahan@gmail.com.
Okay.
And then, you can email us, contact us anytime.
Well, again, if you want to continue the discussion, you can reach out to our friends over on social media. If you want to find out about free association and statehood and why we have people on our island that are advocating for those status options, you're going to have to tune in to next week's Something to Talk About, because we're going to continue this political status discussion all July long. I feel like it's the appropriate time to start decolonizing one's mind. On behalf of the Sorensen Media Group and Patty Arroyo, Philly Younger are here. Thank you so much, Lola. Thanks, Dr.
Algo
Mike.
más.
We will see you next week, same time, same place.